The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, tucked between a water bill and a grocery store flyer, and I almost threw it away with the rest of the mail I don't read. Then I saw the handwriting on the envelope. I would know that handwriting anywhere, even after 7 years. I stood in my kitchen holding it for a long time before I opened it. Inside was a wedding invitation. Cream cardstock, gold lettering, the kind of detail that takes months to plan. And there, in the corner, a small handwritten note. Just a few words. I would love for you to be there. It would mean everything. I sat down at my kitchen table and stared at that sentence until the words stopped looking like words. Because the person who wrote them was someone I had once trusted with everything I had. And she was also the person who taught me, in the most painful way possible, what betrayal actually feels like. Her name was Claire. We met in college, in a class neither of us wanted to take, assigned to the same study group by a professor who had no idea what she was setting in motion. We were inseparable within a month. The kind of friendship that feels less like a choice and more like recognition, like finding a piece of yourself that had been missing without you knowing it. For almost a decade, she was my person. Not a boyfriend, not a sister by blood, but something that sat in its own category, something I never had to explain to anyone, because anyone who knew us simply understood. We lived together after graduation. We held each other through breakups and job losses and a miscarriage I never told anyone else about. I thought, with the kind of certainty you only have when you're young enough to believe certainty is real, that she would be in my life forever. I want to tell you the betrayal happened all at once. A single moment, a single decision, something I could point to and say, that, right there, that's where it broke. But that's not how it happened. It happened slowly, the way most real betrayals do, in small choices that each seemed forgivable on their own. It started with my fiancé, the man I was supposed to marry. Claire had always been close with him too. The three of us spent so much time together that the lines blurred in ways that felt natural at the time. I never thought to question it. I trusted both of them completely. I found out about the affair 11 months before what would have been our wedding. I didn't find out from either of them. I found out from a mutual friend who assumed I already knew, who mentioned it so casually, so offhandedly, that I had to ask her to repeat herself twice before the words actually landed. I confronted Claire that same night. I remember standing in her doorway, my whole body shaking, asking her to tell me it wasn't true. And I remember the silence that followed. Not a denial, just silence. The kind of silence that is its own confession. She didn't even try to explain it in a way that made sense. She just said it had happened slowly, that she hadn't meant for it to happen, that she had been planning to tell me. As if that made any of it different. As if the timeline of her guilt mattered more than the fact that for months she had looked me in the eye while keeping a secret that would end my engagement, my trust, and a decade of friendship in a single conversation. I won't spend too much time on what came after, because if you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved, you already know. You don't need me to describe it. The nights I couldn't sleep. The way I replayed every memory we'd shared, searching for the moment it had started, wondering how long I had been the only one who didn't know. The way grief and anger took turns occupying the same space in my chest, sometimes within the same hour. I lost my fiancé and my best friend in the same season. And the cruelest part wasn't even the loss itself. It was the loneliness that came after. Because the person I would have called to help me through losing him was the same person I had lost him to. I didn't talk to either of them for almost 3 years. I want to be honest about something, because I think it matters. Healing from this wasn't a straight line, and it wasn't fast. I started therapy about 8 months after it happened, mostly because a coworker noticed I wasn't myself and gently suggested it, and I didn't have the energy to argue with her. I almost didn't go back after the first session. It felt like picking at a wound that had only just started to scab over, but I kept going. Slowly, I started to understand things about myself I hadn't had the language for before. I learned that my anger wasn't really about Claire and my ex specifically. It was about what their choices had revealed. that I had built so much of my identity around being needed, around being loyal to a fault, that I had never learned how to ask whether the people I was loyal to were being loyal back. I learned the difference between forgiveness and forgetting. My therapist said something to me in our 6th or 7th session that I still think about. She said, "Forgiveness is something you do for yourself. It has nothing to do with whether the other person deserves it. But it also doesn't require you to hand them anything back." At the time, I didn't fully understand what she meant. I do now. It took almost 2 years before I stopped feeling angry every time Claire's name came up. It took longer than that before I could hear it without my chest tightening. Healing wasn't a moment where I woke up and decided to let it go. It was hundreds of small moments, spread across years, where I chose, again and again, not to let what happened define the rest of my life. Somewhere in that process, I rebuilt myself in a way that had nothing to do with either of them. I moved to a different part of the city. I started running, which I had never been good at and didn't expect to enjoy, and somehow it became the place where I did my best thinking. I made new friends, slower this time, more carefully, with boundaries I hadn't known how to set before. I learned to trust again, but differently, more deliberately. And somewhere in there, without realizing exactly when it happened, I stopped being angry at Claire. I don't mean I excused what she did. I don't mean I decided it was fine, or that I understood it, or that I would have done the same thing in her position. I mean that I simply stopped carrying it as a weight in my daily life. The anger had done its job. It had protected me while I needed protecting. And eventually, I didn't need it anymore. That's where I was when the invitation arrived. I sat with it for almost a week before I made any decision. I want to be honest about the conflict that week, because it wasn't simple. Part of me felt a pull toward going, not because I wanted her back in my life, but because some old, quiet part of me still missed who she used to be. The version of her from before. The one who held my hand in a hospital waiting room once without either of us saying a word. That version of her felt, in some strange way, like a person I had lost to grief rather than betrayal. But another part of me, the part that had spent 2 years in therapy learning to listen to myself, knew that missing who someone used to be is not the same as being ready to let them back into your present. I thought about what it would feel like to sit in that room, to watch her marry someone, surrounded by people who loved her, while I sat somewhere in the middle distance of her life, present, but not really invited back in. A guest at an event, rather than a person in her world. I thought about what my presence there would mean to her. I think, if I'm honest, it would have meant more to her than it would have meant to me. I think she wanted it as proof that everything between us was fully healed, fully restored, as if enough time had simply erased what happened. And that's not what had happened. Time hadn't erased it. I had simply learned to carry it differently. So I made a decision I hoped would honor both truths at once, what I felt and what I wasn't ready to offer. I didn't go to the wedding. Instead, I sent a gift, a genuinely thoughtful one, something I knew she would love, something I picked because I still knew her well enough to know exactly what would mean something to her. And I wrote a card. I sat with that card for almost an hour before I found the right words. I wrote that I was happy for her, that I hoped her marriage brought her the kind of steady, quiet joy that lasts, that I was sending my best wishes sincerely from a place of peace rather than performance. I meant every word of it. She called me 3 days later. Her voice was warm, a little emotional, clearly moved by the gift and the note. She thanked me, more than once. And then she said something that told me she had misunderstood what I was offering. She said she hoped this meant we could go back to how things used to be. She said she had missed me so much. She started talking about getting together soon, catching up properly, like no time had passed at all. I let her finish. And then, as gently as I could, I told her the truth. I told her that I had forgiven her, that I meant that completely, that I had done the work to actually mean it, not just say it. But I told her that forgiveness and reconciliation were not the same thing, and that I had only just realized, in that exact moment, how clearly I understood the difference now. I told her that I wished her every happiness in her marriage, that I genuinely did, but that I had built a life now that didn't have room for the kind of closeness we used to have. And that wasn't a punishment. It was simply where I had ended up after years of healing in a different direction than the one that led back to her. There was a long silence on the phone. I could tell it wasn't the answer she expected. She asked if there was anything she could do to change my mind. I told her, honestly, that this wasn't about anything she could do now. It wasn't about more apologies or more time. It was about the fact that some doors can be closed gently, with no resentment left behind, and still remain closed. I have thought about that phone call many times since, about the look I imagine was on her face, the disappointment in her voice. Part of me still feels for her. I don't think she's a bad person. I think she made a devastating choice at a vulnerable point in her life, and I think she has likely spent years regretting it. But none of that changes what I learned through losing her. I learned that forgiveness is something I can give freely, because it costs me nothing to release resentment I no longer want to carry. But access to my life, my time, my trust, my future, that's not something forgiveness automatically restores. That has to be earned again, slowly, the way trust is always earned, and some relationships don't get the chance to earn it back. Not because of punishment, but because the people involved have simply grown into different lives. I am not angry at Claire anymore. I genuinely wish her well. I hope her marriage is everything she wants it to be. But I also know, with a certainty I didn't have years ago, that peace doesn't always mean reunion. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and for the person who hurt you, is to let them go with grace, rather than let them back in out of guilt or nostalgia. Some people deserve your forgiveness. Not everyone deserves access to your life. This story was submitted by one of our viewers. Names and details have been changed to protect her identity. If you have a story you want to share, the link is in the description. Every story deserves to be heard. Have you ever forgiven someone without letting them back into your life? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. Subscribe to Confess to Me for new stories every week.